Hi, welcome back to Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name is David. If you like what I do and you want to continue to support me, please like and subscribe on this video. Please follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas, and you can listen to me on the Center Left Radio podcast. Now, this is part 2 of the Joe Biden press conference. It's a long press conference. I did the first about 12 minutes. We're going to go back into it to cover the next part, the next 15 minutes or so. So where we are in this particular clip is Yamiche Alcindor, who is CBS reporter, had asked him about immigration, and he didn't answer the part about which families get to stay or not. So that's where we are in her follow-up question, and we're going to go to the video, and then we'll continue from there.
Follow-up question is, one, if you could talk a little bit about which families, why they're being allowed to stay, what the families that are being allowed to stay, why they're being allowed to stay. In addition to that, when it comes to the filibuster, which is what Zeke was asking about, there's immigration is a big issue, of course, when it related to the filibuster, but there's also Republicans who are passing bill after bill trying to restrict voting rights. Chuck Schumer is calling it an existential threat to democracy. Why not back a filibuster rule that at least gets around issues including voting rights or immigration? Jim Clyburn, someone, of course, who you know very well, has backed the idea of a filibuster rule when it comes to civil rights and voting rights.
So what she's mentioning is something I've referred to in my filibuster video, is creating carve-outs in the filibuster. So the way that the current filibuster works is there's currently a carve-out for funding, and this is how we get to reconciliation processes. And anything involving those specific reconciliation with funding and stuff can be passed along a reconciliation bill along a 50-vote threshold. So what she's asking is, why don't you do something like this for voting rights? Because she stated, Republicans are currently curbing voting rights as they just passed the one in Georgia. There's 250 plus bills. So why not create something to be able to pass it? Because they're not going to help you with voting rights as it stands now. And then she was asking the same thing to immigration. Whether both of these things will ultimately happen, I don't know. I don't think Joe Manchin is for it. I don't think Joe Biden is for it. I believe at least the voting rights one should be fine, and then we can fight over immigration elsewhere. But they need to focus on getting this voting rights bill passed to protect the elections.
Well, look, I'm going to deal with all of those problems. The question is the priorities as they come and land on my plate. Let's go to the first question you asked, the first of the second questions you asked, and that is, what about dealing with families? Why are not some not going back? Because Mexico is refusing to take them back. They're saying they won't take them back, not all of them. We're in negotiations with the president of Mexico. I think we're going to see that change. They should all be going back, all be going back. The only people we're not going to let sitting there on the other side of the Rio Grande by themselves with no help are children. And what we're doing there.
So what he's referring to is on the other side of the Rio Grande is they created these tent cities while they're just waiting for something to change in immigration that just isn't going to change. So that's what he's referring to.
It's an important point to understand. I know you understand it. I don't mean to say it that way. Important point to focus on. The vast majority of people under the age of 18 come to the United States come with a telephone number on a wristband, or come with a telephone number in their pocket in the United States. A mother, a father, a close relative, a grandmama or grandpa. What was happening before is it's taking literally weeks and weeks and maybe even months before anybody pick up the phone and call to see if there really was someone there. Well, we've set up a system now where within 24 hours there's a phone call made as that child crosses the border. And then a verification system being put in place as of today to determine quickly whether or not that is a trafficker being called or that is actually a mom, a dad, and or a close relative.
So this is an important distinction. So they're going to say, oh, these people are at the mercy of traffickers and sex traffickers. What he's saying is they're coming with information for, a family member who's already here. That's why they're coming here. And what we're doing is we're giving 24 hours. We're going to have set up to have that call to make sure that that person's a real person. And then we're going to do a background check to make sure that's actually a family member and not a trafficker. This is just more safety protocols for the kids. Because remember, the people they're talking about are children.
They're establishing that right off the bat. If it in fact is mom or dad, dad says, to take the extreme case, I got a birth certificate. Then guess what? We're getting that kid directly to that parent immediately. And so that's going to reduce significantly. There's two ways to reduce child populations in circumstances that are not acceptable, like being held at a Border Patrol station. One is to get them to the place where they have a relative and set a date as to when a hearing can be held.
Now, these will be asylum hearings or will be citizenship hearings. And while the Republicans will say, oh, 1% shows up, it's much closer to 90% that show up. So especially if you have somebody in the family who's already here, if they're connected to a family member, they're much higher rates of people showing up. So that's what he's talking about there.
Second way to do it is put them in a Health and Human Services facility that we're occupying now, both licensed beds around the country that exist, as well as, for example, federal resources like Fort Bliss, to get them safely in a place where they can be taken care of while their fate is determined. Filibuster. Filibuster. With regard to the filibuster, I believe we should go back to a position of the filibuster that existed just when I came to the United States Senate 120 years ago.
Now, that 120 years ago was trending. He was clearly making a joke. But the talking filibuster, I think it'll have some effect. But I think you combine a talking filibuster with the decreasing time to hit a 50 to vote threshold. So you can talk as much as you want, but as a week passes, and if you're still going on, as long as if they're doing a talking filibuster and they're not letting them tag out, once you stop talking, that's it, done. The other way is to have the debate for a week, and at the end of the week, the threshold every couple of days, the threshold to break the filibuster drops from 60 to 55 to 52 to 50, so that you can continue to move on and still have debate. So he's not going to do the latter. He's going to talk about the talking threshold.
And that is that it used to be required for the filibuster, and I had a card on this. I was going to give you the statistics, but you probably know them. That it used to be that from between 1917 and 1971, the filibuster existed. There were a total of 58 motions to break a filibuster.
All of them to stop civil rights.
That whole time. Last year alone, there were 5 times that many. So it's being abused in a gigantic way. And for example, it used to be you had to stand there and talk and talk and talk and talk until you collapsed. And guess what? People got tired of talking and tired of collapsing. Filibusters broke down and we were able to break the filibuster, get a quorum and vote.
And here's the other thing. Some of these things that they're gonna filibuster, like DC statehood, the fact that this is not, its separate thing, is let's have them talk for 15 hours. I want to see what they say for 15 hours, because we already saw in their most recent hearing is one of the Heritage Foundation guys says you don't need DC to be a state. They're already impacting elections by having lawn signs up. So because they're going to be sound bites of gun control, of voting rights, a $15 minimum wage that you're going to be able to use against one party or the other for eternity, as long as you use the talking filibuster. Because at some point you're going to break down and say something stupid.
So I strongly support moving in that direction, in addition to having an open mind about dealing with certain things that are just elemental to the functioning of our democracy, like the right to vote, like the basic right to vote. We've amended the filibuster in the past. But here's the deal. As you observed, I'm a fairly practical guy. I want to get things done. I want to get them done consistent with what we promised the American people. And in order to do that, in a 50-50 Senate, we've got to get to the place where I get 50 votes so that the Vice President of the United States can break the tie, or I get 51 votes without her. And so I'm going to say something outrageous. I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
See, this is one of the problems. He just rambled on and just lost his train of thought. So, I mean, keep going with that. I'm curious to see what he would say about that.
We're going to get a lot done. And if we have to, if there's complete lockdown and chaos as a consequence of the filibuster, then we'll have to go beyond what I'm talking about.
This is the most encouraging part of his talk on the filibuster. I think fundamentally he understands that he will not get things done with Republicans. And I think he hopes that he can do that. But I think he's open to the idea that they will not help him under any circumstances. So he's offering them an olive branch now. And I think they're just going to just slap it away. And I hope he goes the step further if they go to start with the talking filibuster and then just keep going.
Okay, hang on. Sorry. Oh, Singh, Ms. Kim.
So this is one of the other things they're complaining about notes. So apparently he has this note card that has all the reporters on it. I mean, that's good. There's probably a dozen or so reporters in there. I wouldn't know who all of them are. So it's good that he has that to say who's who.
Thank you, Mr. President. To follow up on the filibuster, so do you believe it should take 60 votes to end a filibuster on legislation or 51?
If we could end it with 51, we would have no problem. You're going to have to, the existing rule, it's going to be hard to get a parliamentary ruling that allows 50 votes to end the filibuster, the existence of a filibuster.
So here, that's a weird phrasing. I assume he's talking about the parliamentarian. But as we mentioned over and over again, talking about the previous COVID bill, the parliamentarian can be overruled or fired, and has happened in the past. So you don't have to wait for this. This thing is not entrenched in stone. You can change the filibuster.
It's not my expertise in what the parliamentary rules and how to get there are, but our preoccupation with the filibuster is totally legitimate. But in the meantime, we got a lot we can do while we're talking about what we're going to do about the filibuster. Let me get here. Okay. Cecilia Vega.
I'd like to circle back to immigration, please. You just listed the reasons that people are coming, talking about in-country problems, saying that it happens every year. You blamed the last administration. Sir, I just got back last night from a reporting trip to the border where I met 9-year-old Josel, who walked here from Honduras by himself, along with another little boy. He had that phone number on him, and we were able to call his family. His mother says that she sent her son to this country because she believes that you are not deporting unaccompanied minors like her son. That's why she sent him alone from Honduras. So, sir, you blame the last administration, but is your messaging in saying that these children are and will be allowed to stay in this country and work their way through this process, encouraging families like Josel's to come?
Well, look. The idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, that if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let him starve to death and stay on the other side.
Because look, that statement, that's the other side of the coin. Is okay. So you just let it the Joe. What is this your fault? And is the other argument is then they just die. This is the flip side of the argument. They're being sent here by themselves over this journey, and I think he's talking about the deal that you have to do to the place you have to be in to send your kid like this. But the other argument is, okay, so they get here and then what? Fuck them? Just sucks to be you. Bye. These are children. This is the humane way to deal with this. It is not even humane.
No previous administration did that either, except Trump. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. That's why I've asked the Vice President of the United States yesterday to be the lead person on dealing with focusing on the fundamental reasons why people leave Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador in the first place. It's because of earthquakes, floods. It's because of lack of food. It's because of gang violence. It's because of a whole range of things that when I was vice president and had the same obligation to deal with unaccompanied children, I was able to get it slowed up significantly by working with the heads of state of those communities to do things like in one of the major cities, the reason people were leaving is they couldn't walk the street because their kids were getting beat up or shot or gang violence. Well, what I was able to do is not give money to the head of state because so many are corrupt, but I was able to say, okay, you need lighting in the streets to change things? I'll put the lighting in. We got a contractor. We got the type of lighting. We paid directly to the contractor, did not go through the government. And violent crime significantly was reduced in that city. Fewer people sought to leave.
So this is going back to what he said earlier. If you improve the conditions in these areas, people are going to be less likely to leave. However, you also have to be creative about how you do this because a lot of this area is corrupt. So this is a perfect example of the right way to do things.
When this hurricane occurred, the two hurricanes, instead of us going down and helping in a major way so that people would not have a reason to want to leave in the first place because they didn't have housing or water or sustenance, we did nothing. We're going to do a lot in our administration. We're going to be spending that $700+ million a year to change the life and circumstances of why people leave in the first place. That mother did not sit around on the kitchen table and say, I got a great idea. Why I'm going to make sure my son gets taken care of is I'm going to put him, how old was he or she?
He's 9. I also met a 10-year-old.
A 9-year-old. I'm going to send him on a 1,000-mile journey across the desert and up to the United States because I know Joe Biden's a nice guy and he'll take care of him. What a desperate act to have to take. The circumstances must be horrible. So we can do something about that. That's what the vice president's going to be doing.
And that's the key to this. That's what needs to be pushed every single time. They're not just deciding it. They won't just sitting at home going, it'd be fun. How about you go hang out at Joe Biden's backyard? Just go there. Joe will take care of you for a couple of days. This is a strenuous journey. That kid is 9 and 10-year-olds. Imagine the position you have to be to send your 9 and 10-year-old on this type of journey. That's what his argument is. It's not because I'm not, I'm a nice guy. It's because there are extenuating circumstances in this person's background that's forced them to do this thing. And I'm being a human and saying that child should not just be turned away to go die.
What I did when President Obama asked me to come and deal, I was in Turkey at the time. He said, you got to come home and take care of this. So we put together a plan, and it had an impact. And so the question here is how we go ahead and do this, what we do. There's no easy answer.
Quick follow, if I may. Do you want to see these unaccompanied minors staying in this country, or should they be deported eventually?
Well, the judgment has to be made whether or not, in this young man's case, he has a mom at home. There's an overwhelming reason why he'd be put in a plane and flown back to his mom.
So this is the other thing. Like, we have asylum laws. The part of the problem that there's so much of a backlash and stuff, and they're like, come the right way. If you do follow these laws and come in through the asylum process, you have a process. Most of the asylum claims aren't viewed credible. And when that happens, that person is then sent back. They're asking whether he wants to fundamentally follow the law or not, because under the Trump administration, we didn't.
Follow, sir. You mentioned circumstances that must be horrific. The Customs and Border Protection Facility in Donna, Texas, I was there, is at 1,556% capacity right now with mostly unaccompanied minors. There are kids that are sleeping on floors. They are packed into these pods. I've spoken to lawyers who say that some of these children have not seen the sun in days. What's your reaction? What is your reaction to these images that have come out from that?
That's bad. All of that is bad. All of it was bad under Trump. It was bad under Obama. And it's going to be bad under Joe Biden. But the difference is under Trump is that was the point, was to keep them in these. We've seen a rush of aid to the border to mitigate this, but it is going to take some time for it to take effect.
Particular facility, is what's happening inside acceptable to you? And when is this going to be fixed?
That's a serious question, right? Is it acceptable to me? Come on. That's why we're going to be moving 1,000 of those kids out quickly. That's why I got Fort Bliss opened up. That's why I've been working from the moment this started to happen to try to find additional access for children to be able to safely, not just children, but particularly children, to be able to safely be housed while we follow through on the rest of what's happening. That is totally unacceptable.
The other thing is, I do believe trying to put them in hotels would be better because it would cost significantly less. As it stands now, these private contractors that they put them with cost $700 a day per kid. It would cost significantly less if you put them in housing, and if you, especially as hotels, are opening up a little bit more. But it was easier a couple months ago. But you can, fund this through the hotels, and that would keep people's jobs and stuff. And then spend it. It would cost you significantly less, and you could spend, more money elsewhere.
Ken.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about
So this is going to be the last question for this video.
Afghanistan. You face a May 1st deadline for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from that country. As a candidate in foreign affairs, you wrote that it is past time to end these forever wars. Can you commit to the American people that by May 2nd, the U.S. will no longer have forces in Afghanistan?
The answer is that it's going to be hard to meet the May 1 deadline. Just in terms of tactical reasons, it's hard to.
So my understanding of the reason he can't meet this is because whatever the deal was with the Taliban, they're not currently doing it. They're not abiding by it. So we'd just pull out and create a power vacuum. And that appears to be the biggest implement to us pulling out, is not creating a power vacuum where we have something similar to ISIS rise up. So that's going to be his response.
Get those troops out. So what we've been doing, what I've been doing, and what Secretary Blinken has been doing, we've been meeting with our allies, those other nations that have NATO allies who have troops in Afghanistan as well. And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way. We're in consultation, I say, with our allies and partners and how to proceed. And Secretary Blinken is meeting in Brussels this week with our NATO allies, particularly those who have forces there. And General Austin is just met with Kayani, and I'm waiting for the briefing on that. He is the leader, quote, in Afghanistan and Kabul. And there's a UN-led process that's beginning shortly on how to mechanically get people, how to end this war. But it is not my intention to stay there for a long time. But the question is, how and in what circumstances do we meet that agreement that was made by President Trump to leave under a deal that looks like it's not being able to be worked out to begin with? How's that done? But we are not staying a long time.
Okay, so very quickly for this one, this was talking a lot about the immigration. Like I've said over and over again, there's a whole bunch of factors into it. I think he does a good job in this one of, talking about the factors. And once again, the argument of, okay, do you want these kids to stay? The counterpoint to that is, well, then they just die on the way back, or they just sit there and die anyway. So there is this is the more humane solution. Even then, it's not a humane solution because, as they were talking about, the facilities are not prepared. And this was definitely on Joe Biden, is that they were not prepared for these facilities. And that's where a lot of the resources are being pushed. And so as we see in the coming weeks, whether or not they're actually improving the situation with these holding facilities, that's what's going to determine this. If we're, still 1,500% over capacity in like 2 months' time, then there's a real problem and they're not doing this correctly. So thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. Please follow me at Twitter @FacesIdeas, and I will see you in the next one.